Harris. Before we move on to other issues, it's looking increasingly likely that Kamala Harris is going to appear on Joe Rogan's program, on his podcast, whose audience is massive. If you were advising her, would you recommend that she be a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience?
No, I would not. She has ducked all of the difficult interviews that she could have done. The fact that the Democrats are currently putting her out there is actually a sign that she's not doing well, or she's not doing as well as she should be doing in the polls. The Democrat plan has been hide Kamala from the cameras to any extent that you can. And specifically don't get her onto anything where there could be details expected. You can get her on The View. You can get her on a couple of other just sort of puff pieces. You can get her on the cover of Vogue, of course.
All right, guys. So I'm pretty sure most of you know that former President Trump is set to go on Joe Rogan's show. I believe it is going to be tomorrow, Friday, October the 25th. That is going to happen, and it's probably going to be the biggest podcast in history, okay? Because we're going to have a 2 to 3 hour conversation between Joe Rogan and former President Trump. It's going to be free-flowing. It's going to be basically a normal conversation, which is the type of environment that President Trump thrives in, okay? I don't think that Trump is as good in more scripted environments. I think Trump is actually a lot better in environments where he can just sit back, relax, chill, and just talk, right? And just, be himself, okay? And I think that Trump has seen massive success with doing these podcasts that mostly are focused on young men, okay? Because young men are consuming a lot of media like Joe Rogan, like Theo Vaughn, like the Nelk Boys, and J.D. Vance and President Trump have been all on top of that, right? And of course, the Kamala Harris campaign has decided to copy President Trump in this podcast strategy, and Kamala Harris has done a little bit of it, but not nearly to the same degree as former President Trump and J.D. Vance, because honestly, Kamala Harris is not good at all in these types of settings. If she doesn't have a script, if she doesn't have set talking points, if she has to actually talk off the top of her head, okay, then she's going to fall apart, right? And she's scared to death of saying anything that her handlers didn't tell her it was okay to say, okay? This is why when she gets pressed about anything, like, for example, does she now support the border wall despite calling it a vanity project, this is why she instantly falls apart, okay? Because her handlers have not coached her on how to dodge answering that question in a way that actually makes sense, okay? So with that being said, nobody should be surprised to see that Kamala Harris allegedly will not be on Joe Rogan or the All In podcast. Now, this has been confirmed by David Sachs, who is part of the All In podcast. Apparently, Kamala Harris is running away from doing a conversation with Joe Rogan, essentially missing out on a largely male audience, which who knows? I mean, the more that Kamala Harris talks, the more that people dislike her. So, this could honestly be the right strategy. I'm not sure. But interestingly enough, allegedly she is recording an interview with Shannon Sharpe for his Club Shay Shay podcast. Okay, so Kamala Harris is avoiding Joe Rogan and instead opting to go in a much friendlier environment where they're going to allow her to essentially give scripted answers with no pushback. They're not going to deep dive on anything. Shannon Sharpe is definitely not smart enough to press her and to really try to get deep into a conversation like Joe Rogan. So again, it's just not going to be the same level of engagement, okay? I think that the Shannon Sharpe audience is also different. They're less sophisticated than the Joe Rogan audience. And I think that's why they're choosing to do this, right? They understand that, okay, well, the Joe Rogan audience might be too sophisticated. Let's avoid them. We're going to go to Club Shay Shay because we know that we can kind of dumb it down over there and it'll be fine, right? And Shannon Sharpe is probably going to agree to allow them to edit the interview in whatever way they want. All the answers will be scripted. It's not going to be a real conversation. It's just going to be Shannon Sharpe asking Kamala Harris pre-approved questions and her giving her talking points or whatever, and that's it, right? And she's going to do it to say that she did it. It's not going to be real, okay? Which, by the way, I want to mention this because I didn't do a video on this because I didn't think it was relevant enough for me to do a video on it. But since I'm talking about Shannon Sharpe, I want to say that I lost a whole lot of respect for Shannon Sharpe due to his recent stunt of essentially trying to prove that he's not gay by Instagram living himself having sex. Okay, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that story, but Shannon Sharpe accidentally Instagram lived himself having sex with some random woman. It wasn't graphic, you couldn't see it, but you could hear the moaning sounds. And clearly this was staged. I mean, the guy basically tried to say at first that it happened on accident. He doesn't know how it happened. His phone was hacked. And it's like, bro, that never happens, right? You don't accidentally go live on Instagram while you're having sex. Clearly, it was staged so that he could prove to the world that he's not gay, okay? Because there are rumors out there that, again, he might be gay. And my thing is this. If as a 6 foot plus, big, strong black man that was formerly an NFL star, if you have to go out of your way to prove that you clap cheeks, right, that you are straight, okay, then that makes me ask a whole lot more questions about your sexuality, right? I actually have more questions than answers from Shannon Sharpe pulling that extremely lame stunt than I would have had he just not addressed it at all, right? If he just didn't do it, I wouldn't have any real legitimate reasons to believe that a former NFL star isn't having a lot of sex, right? I mean, I just believe by default, okay, the guy is rich, he's famous, he is probably with a lot of women, okay? And there are more subtle ways to prove that you're not gay than to do something like that. You know, you could get a girlfriend, get married, right? You could be seen out in public with women, okay, like that you're dating or that you're with, okay? There are way more subtle ways and less lame ways, because that's what that stunt was. Like, that's just a lame thing to do. There are just way better ways to prove that you're not gay than to do that, okay? The fact that he did that, it makes me ask a whole lot more questions, okay? So I want to say that little tidbit about Shannon Sharpe, but regardless here, back to the whole point of the video, is that Kamala Harris is going on that podcast, avoiding Joe Rogan. And again, one of the reasons why is because Joe Rogan has a mostly male audience, which she needs. However, a lot of young men do not have a favorable opinion of Kamala Harris, right? Like, for example here, as Deseret recently reported, one recent poll of registered voters between the ages of 18 and 29 in battleground states, 59% of women said they had a favorable view of Harris compared to 38% of men. Okay, so yeah, only 38% of men have a favorable view of Kamala Harris. And apparently a lot of these young men, college age men, right, college students more specifically, they are embracing Trump and they are shying away from Kamala Harris because they do not want to be sent off to fight wars, which is what was reported on by CNN. Take a look.
I want to get a sense of what you are hearing, and then just to kind of put in context some of what we've been talking about in the show today and before, which is the Trump campaign is so heavily trying to get men, young men in particular, especially those who you talked to who were too young to vote last time, maybe didn't know a lot about remember what it was like to live in Donald Trump's America when he was president. And they are hitting social media posts questioning the masculinity of Tim Walz, Doug Emhoff, insinuating effectively that if you are a real man, you will not vote for Kamala Harris. Is that what you're hearing? Is it coming back at you?
It's coming back a little bit, but I think it's important to point out with Gen Z, with voters under 30, a lot of their concerns, men and women, are about the economy and inflation. And you guys talked about this earlier in the show. Those sort of culture war, manosphere issues, UFC, Zin, masculinity, Joe Rogan, those are adjacent to topics like inflation, to concerns about the state of the world, to general anxiety that has existed with young men, because you're exactly right. You know, some of these folks that I've been talking to on this college tour we've been doing for Good Luck America were only 9, 10, 11 years old when Donald Trump was in office. They also went through COVID when they were coming of age. And so young men in particular, in polls and focus groups bear this out, just have a lot of anxiety about the state of the world. Donald Trump is using some of those cultural tactics to tap into that anxiety. But the issues I hear, Dana, are very removed from the conversations that are currently going on in Washington.
Shocking.
About John Kelly and fascism, about Joe Rogan. Men in particular on these campuses, they don't really care that much from what I've been hearing about these cultural issues. They care about everyday concerns. Again, only about a third of Americans, Dana, you have a college degree. So this is a subsample of younger voters in general. But the young men that I have been talking to in particular, they don't hate Kamala Harris. They actually like her in certain ways. And even young Republicans I've talked to talk about her more warmly than I guarantee they would have about Hillary Clinton. They just say they think the world was better and safer under Donald Trump. The economy was healthier. One other thing that keeps coming up too that you don't hear a lot about in the national media, Dana, is a lot of young men are worried about global conflict because they are of draft age. That comes up over and over and over again in conversations that I've been having over the last few weeks when I've been traveling through all these states on campuses.
Wow. So lo and behold, young men actually care about real issues and not the emotional issues that women care about, right? Young men care about the economy. They care about jobs. They care about how they're going to make a living. They care about foreign conflict because, hey, if a war starts, who they're going to send, right? They're not going to send all the young women, okay, to go fight the war. No, they're going to send the young men. So when you have Kamala Harris running around, palling around with Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney and all the neocons, yeah, that's turning off a whole lot of men, okay? Because, again, young men realize that, hey, we need somebody in office that is going to try to avoid foreign conflict because, again, if foreign conflict breaks out and the U.S. is involved and it gets bad enough, okay, then, hey, we got to go fight and die for the country, okay? We have to sacrifice our lives, so we actually have some skin in the game, okay? And again, this is different from women who don't really have skin in the game when it comes to protecting the country, not in the same way that young men do. And yeah, that's what allows them to vote based off emotional things like, well, Trump derangement and access to abortion, things that in my opinion aren't as important as the real issues that, are affecting this country. Again, like, for example, the economy, immigration, and foreign policy, right? It's just amazing how that works. But again, you can see that Kamala Harris cozying up to the neocons and the warmongers is not really helping her out when it comes to young men, okay? And if she was to go on a podcast like Joe Rogan's podcast, he's actually going to press her on those things, right? He's actually going to want to have these deeper conversations about foreign conflicts and wars, which is something that she definitely does not want to get into.
He has said that he's casting himself as a protector of Israel. Do you believe you would be more pro-Israel than Donald Trump?
I believe that Donald Trump is dangerous. I believe that when you have a president of the United States who has said to his generals who work for him because he is commander-in-chief, these conversations, I assume many of them took place in the Oval Office. And if the president of the United States, the commander-in-chief, is saying to his generals, in essence, why can't you be more like Hitler's generals, Anderson? Come on. This is a serious, serious issue. And we know who he is. He admires dictators, sending love letters back and forth with Kim Jong-un.
Now, Shannon Sharpe is not going to do that, right? Shannon Sharpe is probably not even going to ask about foreign conflict. He's not going to ask any question that is going to make Kamala Harris uncomfortable at all, right? He'll probably be talking about race. He'll be talking about abortion. He'll be talking about a whole bunch of stuff that, again, it's just nobody cares about, right? That podcast will be more geared towards the black women that watch the show more so than men, okay? But again, if she was to go on Rogan, again, this conversation, this topic would be a huge topic. It would be a big topic that she is just not prepared to talk about, right? She's just not. She can't do it. Not for 3 hours. Not for 3 hours. Now, on the other hand, Trump, again, I'm prepared for Trump to not only be able to talk about it, but to also tell a lot of fun stories, a lot of fascinating stories about his foreign policy experience and dealing with world leaders and stuff like that. That's what we're going to get. We're not going to get that from Kamala Harris, okay? Because she's not an authentic person. First and foremost, she's not authentic enough to do it. She's not comfortable enough to have a real conversation without her script, okay, and her handlers. And then on top of that, again, I don't think she's intelligent enough either to have the conversation. So, that's just what it is at this point. Okay. So again, this is why it seems like she's opting to go with Shannon Sharpe over Joe Rogan, which I think, could be not a bad move at this point, considering how if she goes on Joe Rogan and she doesn't really do a good job, right? If she comes off as awkward and weird, then it may hurt her with the demographic that she's trying to reach. She's not going to have that same type of pressure on her doing it with Shannon Sharpe, which, by the way, I also want to note that JD Vance has been doing a lot of these podcasts. And the one thing that you see happening over and over and over again in the comment section of some of these podcasts, like, for example, the Theo Von podcast, is the amount of people saying JD Vance is not weird, right? It's amazing how the liberal media tried to say that JD Vance was weird when this guy is super normal, okay? And again, when you hear him talk in some of these long form interviews, he definitely comes off as just a normal guy, right? Like an everyday dude, okay? However, Kamala Harris is actually the one that's the weirdo, okay? Tim Walz is actually the one that's the weirdo, okay? And the weirdos, because they're weird, right, are avoiding any type of platform that will expose their weirdness to the world. So I just find it to be hilarious how all this is working out. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.